It is so overwhelming sometimes. Really so overwhelming. I mean, because their solution, listen to what their solution is. Their solution is sometimes what we do here in the United States affects the rest of the world. And so, we have to get rid of this government that answers to the people and just put it in the hands of a very few and have a globalist state. What do you think's going to happen when it's a globalist state? You think things are going to get better? Everybody in the world is going to be pissed off. Everybody. They were just, again, going back to Cyprus. When they've taken 30 to 40%, and now they're saying anybody who has $130,000 or more in the bank, by the way, that most likely is your employer, they are going to lose 30 to 40%. Now, I don't care if your employer has 50 employees or is GE. If they have money in the bank and they lose 30 to 40% of their money, of their cash, they're not making payroll. They're not making payroll, gang.
No way.
They're not making payroll. And this is now the banks over in Europe, the European Central Bank, has now said this is happening in Cyprus, but it's about to happen in Spain, in Greece, in Italy, and France. I'm trying to remember the last one. I think it's France.
That's not the last one. They said, and other.
Oh, yeah, and others.
European
But
countries.
the ones that they named, I think, was France. So it's going to happen. Now, what are you going to do? This, by the way, think of the control that we have already given. By the way, we were talking about Michael Bloomberg. You can read about what's happening in Cyprus. If you just go to Bloomberg News, wait a minute. Bloomberg Financial News. Boy, I bet he doesn't get hurt. If he's the leader in the global financial news department. Isn't that nice? You've got a guy who's designing the new system, who's delivering the news. Oh, that's really good, isn't it? This you can find in Road to Serfdom. The extent of control over all life that economic control confers is nowhere better illustrated than in the field of foreign exchanges. Nothing would, at first, seem to affect private life less than state control of the dealings in foreign exchange. But most people regard its introduction with complete indifference. Basically, what they've just done to Cyprus and now are doing to Europe, most people will regard with extreme indifference. It won't affect people's lives. It won't really. I mean, it doesn't affect my life, right? Yet the experience of most continental countries, meaning most countries in Europe, has taught thoughtful people to regard this step as the decisive advance on the path to totalitarianism and the suppression of individual liberty. It is, in fact, the complete delivery of the individual to the tyranny of the state, the final suppression of all means of escape, not merely for the rich, but for everybody. Meaning, if they control your money, if they control how you spend it, if they control every lever on money, currency, exchange, you're done. You're done. Because you cannot escape. You cannot leave. Now, I'm sure you could just get on a train. Oh, no, wait. In Europe, they're making sure that you can't get across because they're now for the first time ever, border control checks to make sure nobody's carrying currency out. We have the TSA. Do you think, how hard is it to get across the country if the TSA decides you're not going anywhere? You think you're going anywhere in this country? You're not getting onto an airplane. You're not getting into a train. And do you think you're going to actually be able to drive across the country? You better have cash. Oh, and you better wear a ski mask every time you stop someplace because there's going to be a camera everywhere. You're not going anywhere. I don't know if you've heard what Switzerland is doing, but the United States has said they're looking for tax evaders. Look, I don't agree with tax evasion, but what they're doing now is terrifying. The United States government has gone to Switzerland and convinced the Swiss banks to give us all the serial numbers of all of the accounts held by Americans. Tell us how much Americans have in your Swiss bank accounts. Just that is bad enough. That's never happened before. How much money is in the Swiss bank accounts? Well, Switzerland has said, well, we're not going to tell you who has them. That's okay. We'll just start publishing the numbers and we'll start doing our own internal checks. and we'll start asking people to have a lot of money, is this your Swiss bank account? And if they don't admit to it, then we're going to come back to you, and you are going to give us the name that matches that account. And the Swiss banks have said, okay. They didn't even do that for the Germans. There is, I mean, you look at what Russia's doing. They just pounded 30 to 40% of all of the Russian billionaires that had their money in Cyprus. Stu brought up a really good point a few minutes ago. Who are those Russian billionaires? Why did they have money in Cyprus? Were those the guys who thought, I don't want to be under the thumb of Putin somehow or another? Are those the guys with real friends in Russia? I don't know. Why did they have their money over in Cyprus? But they did. Now, we've been looking at this and saying that Russia is going to be really pissed off. I will tell you right now that Russia may say one thing out loud, but Europe is going to be delivered to the Russians, bound and gagged. They are being delivered and served up. The people of Europe will beg for the Russians to take control. They will beg. Because the European central banks and the Western way of life is going to look so decadent, so awful, it is going to be so criminal by the end, that by the time the Russians come and they say, we'll get your money, we'll free this up, we're going to stop this nonsense, we'll be delivered to the Russians. If you're over in Europe, you'll be delivered to the Russians, and they'll give you your gas, they'll give you your heat, they'll make sure everything is okay. And Europeans will cheer for the end of the European Union. Remember, they've already given a bad guy. Who's the bad guy in Europe? The bad guy, somehow or another, is Germany. How is Germany the bad guy? How is that happening? Germany's the bad guy because they're the most successful. They're the ones with the biggest work ethic. You can't have somebody with work ethic. You can't have anybody more successful than the other European nations. Germany wouldn't play by the rules. They won't go and take all of that time off. They won't go and live like French or the Spaniards. They actually wanted to improve. They wanted to make good vehicles. They wanted to lead the world. Well, we can't have that, and that's why they've been made the bad guys yet again. And so they have been forced to bail everybody out. Well, let me ask you something. If you're being forced in your whole family, and your family has lived an extravagant life, and you've been standing there the whole time going, guys, I'm not living my life that way, and I think this is a mistake, don't do it. If the whole family turns to you and says, come on, just bail them out. Just bail them out. You do it once. The second time somebody else fails in the family, while the first one is still failing, and it hasn't changed their behavior, you say, look, I'm going to bail you out, but I want some strings attached to this one. You're going to change your life. The third family member that starts to fail, you have real strings attached. The fourth one that fails, you say, I'm not giving any money. And somehow or another, the person who has helped his family out and said the whole time you guys are living a life that won't stand, somehow or another, the world has turned on Germans and the German people in the German Republic. Because why? Because they helped, because they bailed out, because they want some sort of promise that they're going to get their money back, that they don't just want to flush it down the toilet. The whole European world is going to turn against two things. One, the European Union. Two, the Western banks and the central banks. Three, Germany. Those are the bad guys. I warn you, don't make Germany the bad guys. It doesn't ever end up well. Don't make the Germans the bad guys. The Germans, I think, this time are going to say, to hell with the West. And I think the Germans will actually get into bed with the Russians because they'll need somebody to protect them because America can't protect them. America will damn them as the bad guys. And so they will go stand with the Russians. And there will be a new German-Russian alliance that should turn the whole world inside out and upside down. And people should say, what? And as the central banks and everything else, the West collapses and has a gasp, what will happen then? They will sing the praise of Vladimir Putin, and he will march in, and it will be a new Russian era. And what will we be? Alone, financially bankrupt, in absolute chaos, one that is having massive race wars because you took the land, and everybody who said they were going to get the land back, they're going to go and take that. China will be here digging for their resources and saying, "You damn right, you're going to pay me back." And our children will be enslaved. Maximum freedom, maximum personal responsibility. That is what's lacking, and that is the key. We have to live a life as individuals and as towns with maximum responsibility, personal responsibility, and then give people maximum freedom. There's a very small window here because you've already passed the exits. There are very few before this bridge just runs out. Maximum responsibility, maximum freedom.